Keep Our Republic is a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization. Since the spring of 2020, we've been doing our part to help keep our republic. We do it through hyper-localized civic education. We talk with Americans through town halls, legal seminars, media briefings, and other events. We know a lot of Americans have a lot of questions right now about how our democracy really works. Questions like, what actually happens behind the scenes on election night, and just what is the power of the federal courts? That's why we're talking directly to election officials and judges from across the country. Together, we can help answer some of those questions. Welcome back, everyone, to Keepers of Our Republic. My name is Brooke. I'm the Special Projects Manager, the nonpartisan nonprofit Keep Our Republic. Each week, we are talking in depth with judges and election officials from across the country and across the political spectrum about how to support our elections and our democratic institutions. Today, I have the honor of being joined by Judge Robert Cindrich. He's a former federal judge for the U.S. District Court for the Western District of Pennsylvania. He's also a former public defender, a former assistant district attorney. He did private practice and was a U.S. attorney for the Western District of Pennsylvania as well. There's a ton we could talk about today, but today in particular, we're going to speak on a very important issue, and that is the issue of judicial impeachment, which has started to come up in the news cycle. Here to talk with us about that is Judge Cindrich. Welcome.
Thank you, and I'm happy to be here.
One of the things I forgot to add in your bio is that you are, of course, also a member of the Article 3 Coalition, which is made up of former federal judges, sort of speak on issues affecting the federal judiciary and that Article 3 branch of our government. So sort of by way of introduction, you want to talk about a little bit your background and why you decided to join this coalition when you could be enjoying a nice retirement otherwise?
Yes. Well, I think you know that sitting Article 3 judges are pretty much bound by ethical constraints from saying anything, no matter what is happening that they disagree with, whether it's political or whether it's what's going on right now with impeachments. They pretty much confine themselves to the cases in front of them. So they need support and hopefully public support. But somebody has to tell the story. So we're a bunch of retired judges. There are 52 of us now. And we thought we need to tell the public what's going on here, why this is not good, and how this affects members of the judiciary, and how in turn that affects them, the public.
So one of the things that has really come up over the past couple of weeks here, we're recording in early December 2025, is these public calls to impeach certain federal judges after they've made some rulings disagreeing with the current executive administration. Talk us through a little bit about the letter, the statement made by the Article 3 Coalition, and then we'll dive into some of the specifics.
Yes. Well, if I can just go back just for a minute. The Constitution provides a means and the reasons that you can impeach a judge. And the history teaches us why that's in the Constitution. Remember that the colonies were ruled by a king. The king had the power to appoint and remove judges. A king had the power to take away their courtroom or take away their salary. So the king actually had control of the judicial system, and a great effort was made in the Constitution to change that and to make sure that judges were independent. But they can't be above everything. There has to be some control over judges, especially if they commit crimes. So in the Constitution, they provided for lifetime tenure. Judges who are appointed under Article 3 are appointed for life. Mm-hmm. Or you could say it another way, upon good behavior. That's interpreted in the Constitution. It means if they haven't committed any high crimes or misdemeanors, treason or bribery.
Right.
All right. So in other words, the protection was intentionally put in that Constitution specifically to say no king will tell our judges what to do.
Right.
And so we've had very few instances of actual impeachments over the years. There have been a few. There's a famous Samuel Justice Chase case way back when in I think 1807 or so. Mm-hmm. But not too many.
And we say it was important to the founders, that it was something they wanted to include in the Constitution. That's not just us speculating, right? Like it's actually among the actual grievances listed in the Declaration was the fact that the king owned the bench, essentially.
Yes, they actually, and there's a pithy quote about what the king has done. It was one of the list of grievances, and I think that came from Hamilton.
The very
They,
same.
yeah, the very description of what the king has done, appointing and removing at will, reducing salaries.
Hmm.
So, when we talk about independence, the United States being freeing itself from a monarchy, there is no independence in a monarchy.
Right.
The king rules all. But the whole idea behind it was to create a new kind of government which was independent of any king or monarch. And that meant creating, in the founders' minds, and I believe sensibly so, a independent judiciary that the monarch, we don't have a monarch, but nobody could touch except upon good reasons.
And like you said, there have been, it's not that this has never happened, right? There have been impeachments. It's something like a dozen or so, but they've been historically for very serious, I mean, tax evasion, sexual abuse, into I think a couple of them intoxication, right? No surprise in the legal
Bribery.
industry, bribery. And then there was the 1800s case where I think you're right. It was Justice Chase or Judge Chase was tried for impeachment in the Senate and found not guilty. I'm not remembering what the correct term for it is when it's a Senate procedure, but not guilty, basically affirming this belief that just not ruling the way the executive wants you to is not a basis for removal. It's the precedent. Correct me if I'm wrong. The precedent seems pretty clear.
Now, you are clear and you are right. If we did it that way, and so the king or whoever's in power can just remove you because I don't like what you ruled,
Right.
especially if it's the rule is something that affects or restricts me, the king. So that would mean that judges would have no independence. And pretty soon, every judge would be quaking in their boots and obviously being afraid to be impeached or worse. So that's the first reason why you have it. That would remove all independence from the judiciary if impeachment was because you don't like what they say. And keep in
Right.
mind, I was a trial judge. And if you didn't like as a litigant, or as the government was
Hmm.
often a litigant, what I did as a trial judge in terms of my legal rulings. I mean, mostly we had juries there, but sometimes it would be the judge as a finder of fact. You go and appeal. That's why we have an appeal process to the Court of Appeals, in our case for the Third Circuit, but in any of the various circuits,
Right.
and then to the Supreme Court. So that's what you do when you have a judge and you disagree with the rulings of the court. You appeal it.
Yeah. So, with all that kind of context, let's take a step back for anyone who missed this in the news cycle. It's not like there's not a lot going on. When we're talking about these calls for impeachment, what has been happening in the past several weeks, months, that has sort of forced the Article 3 coalition's hand or inspired you guys to take action and issue this statement?
Yes, well, we've recently had calls for impeachment hearings, not yet articles of impeachment. That's how an impeachment starts when there actually is one. They draw up articles of impeachment, then they have to get an approval of those articles, and then eventually there's a trial and a vote on the articles. But here, what we're talking about is the threat of impeachment by convening a committee of the Congress to examine the proceedings. So one of them of course, Judge Boasberg. And as you said, unless you don't read the newspaper or watch the TV or listen to the radio, you have to know that Judge Boasberg has been involved in making some difficult decisions which clashed with what the administration would like. Some of those pertain to immigration. Some of them pertain to disregard of the court's orders, not to send a person away out of this country unless and until due process had taken place. And some of it pertains to impeachment, where the judge, after practically giving up on it, I said impeachment, I meant contempt. Actually, Judge Boasberg finally said, "You won't listen to me. I've issued rulings. The government doesn't disregards them, and in that regard, I can hold you in contempt of court." But so all of those things happen. And so we now have the spectacle of this judge being brought before the court, not because of a high crime or a misdemeanor or bribery uh, or anything, except you don't like what he says. You don't like how he rules. And that is absolutely unwarranted. And let's face it, judges are humans. I mean, we're pretty tough folks. We are. We've been through a lot to get there, and we do a lot in the courtroom every day. I mean, whether it's criminal cases or civil cases, but nobody's beyond being put into fear. And threatening a person's livelihood, which means their family's livelihood, will put them in fear or could. And if so, then we're interfering with the independence of the judiciary. That's the vice in just calling for these impeachment inquiries. It's an attempt to intimidate.
Right. And it seems unlikely that with this Senate that these, they would confirm impeachment on any articles for these judges. I, who's to say what this Senate will and will not do? But let's assume for a moment that they adhere to the precedent on these issues. The very call for these impeachment inquiries in and of itself has this chilling effect, I would think, on judicial independence, on the livelihoods, but also we've seen, unfortunately, over the past couple of years, can be a bit of a dog whistle on the actual lives and safety of these judges when they are put into the spotlight, the crosshairs, of certain, extremist people in this country by calling them out and calling from their removal.
I'm glad you mentioned that, Brooke, because yes, when you have this kind of thing and incendiary remarks, judges are called lunatics, leftists, judges are accused of disregarding the law. Yes, it incites a certain segment of the population. Luckily, it's not a huge segment, but it's there. And those are the people who can end up causing great harm to the judge or the judge's family. Uh, this year, 2025 is a record year for threats against judges. I mean, we all live with threats. I mean, I was a judge and you get threats and you have to assess them. Some threats are not actionable. They're idle threats. I mean, don't forget, we're hearing all these criminal cases, drug cases, sometimes homicides, rarely homicides in federal court unless it involved a federal official. But the point is, you cannot be without some concern about those threats. And with as many as there are there this year, and I believe they will increase. I think these are all statistics, by the way, we get from the United States Marshal, whose job it is to protect the courts. So yes, you are entirely correct. This puts judges and their families in danger. And I think you know and have read about a case in New Jersey involving the death of a judge's son. But so it happens. Let's pray that it doesn't happen frequently. But this kind of thing definitely stirs up the crazies.
So purely speculative, but do you think that if articles of impeachment are drawn up by the House for some of these judges like Boasberg and brought to the Senate, do you think we could realistically be facing a situation where we see impeachments for the bench for things we've never seen before?
Uh, I don't think so. At least, it takes a two-thirds majority. Eventually,
Yeah.
you have to have approval of the articles of impeachment. The articles are like the counts of an indictment.
Hmm.
So that has to be approved, and you have to get a vote on it. And don't forget, even though we're divided politically in the Congress, both the Senate and the House, not everybody is on board with this kind of conduct.
Yeah.
So that would be hard. But if you did get articles of impeachment approved, then you would have to have a trial. You have to prove what you say the judge did that was wrong. And it must be a high crime or a misdemeanor or a bribe,
Right.
something that the Constitution prescribes. Then you have to get a two-thirds majority of the vote. And as you know, in the Samuel Chase case, they got no votes.
Yeah.
Even though the articles were approved, the trial went forward. In the end, those separate parties, the protagonist and the antagonist, all agreed there were no basis to the charge. But think of what that man went through,
Yeah.
being a justice of the Supreme Court of the United States and having to endure the indignities of a proceeding like that,
Yeah.
which was obviously sham.
So there's obviously the individual harm to that justice, fears for their safety, harm to the bench. I want to ask, what are the long-term effects of this sort of rhetoric being increasingly put out there by high-level administration officials or parroted by the media or other people who've got a soapbox? The fact that we are hearing this now over and over again, what effect do you think that's going to have long term on the judiciary branch?
That could definitely erode public confidence because they're going to hear this over and over.
Yeah,
And some people are going to start thinking, well, there must be something wrong there. I mean, all this is being said over and over that judges should be impeached, that they're lunatics, and that they're not following the law, and that they're biased, and all the other things that are being said. So eventually, public confidence in the judiciary will, I think, wane.
yeah,
But in addition to that, don't forget, a lot of the cases are between our government and the citizen, whether that's a tax case and you have a
hmm
dispute with the IRS, whether that's a criminal case and you're charged with something, whether it's a collection case, whether it's a claim by a citizen against the government. Now, how is a citizen going to feel comfortable about the judge being impartial when the citizen knows that that judge, just because the government doesn't like what he might
right,
rule, so the citizen's going to wonder whether he can get or she can get fair treatment in front of that judge.
right,
So that's a bad thing. But even beyond that, think about how we settle disputes. I mean, you and your neighbor have a squabble over the property line
yeah,
or some other thing, noise abatement, whatever. Well, you could what? You could go out and have a fist fight.
yeah,
Probably not a good idea, and
yeah,
somebody could get hurt. You could curse each other. You could get weapons. Or you could what? Do what we've done for 250 years, go to court.
go to court. Yeah,
Why? It's a peaceful resolution. And if you have confidence in the independence of the judiciary and know that even if some error was made, you can appeal it.
yeah,
So dispute resolution in a peaceful fashion is the whole aim of the law,
right.
and certainly the aim of the judiciary. But for that to happen, people have to have confidence that when they go to the judiciary, that judge will be independent and not biased and not frightened
Yeah,
into ruling in a way that's inappropriate.
yeah. It's so foundational to having a not just a just society, but a peaceful society that people can live in, not have to live in fear of violence because they know there is a system in place that theoretically is an alternative to violence for arbitrating disputes. I think of one of my favorite, most interesting stories from when I was a prosecutor back in Brooklyn. I was a prosecutor for one of the most violent precincts in New York City, probably the country. And I was working on my first attempted homicide case as a grand jury assistant. And we went to the hospital. This man had been basically shot execution style by a rival gang member in front of his child and had survived. And we took his grand jury testimony from the hospital room where he was recovering. And after we'd finished his testimony, I asked him along with my colleague, I we know your rap sheet, we know your background, we know you and your gang have beef with this other gang. Why are you cooperating with us? Like why did you decide to go to the police. And I will never forget it. He very thoughtfully looked at me and he said, this happened in front of my son. I'm like, yeah, we know. And he said, I wanted to show him there was another way.
Oh,
And if we,
wonderful.
I will never forget it. And I think about that as we talk about, erosion of public trust. It's this very like intangible concept. And I don't think people realize what's at stake if that goes away. Like it's not an abstract loss. It's like a very real people's lives are at stake when we don't have a system that we think we can trust.
Yes, civility is at stake.
Yeah.
Once we begin to lose confidence in government, in courts, in a peaceful way to make decisions. For example, we're a greatly industrious country. We invent things here. Why? Because under the Constitution, your intellectual property, your invention, is protected.
Yeah.
And the courts are where you go to get that protected. If you're a company and you have a fiduciary duty to all your stockholders to make sure your company and its assets are protected, where do you go? You go to the courts. Or if the government is doing the wrong thing by way of your company, whether it's an antitrust suit or a tax suit, you go to the courts. Once we lose confidence in that, it's not just peacefulness that's broken, it's the whole economic system.
Right.
We rely on the law and the courts to protect what we own directly, our homes, our cars, our properties, what we own indirectly through stock in companies.
Right.
So yes, I agree with you. It would, in the end, constitute an entire breakdown of society. If there's no way to protect yourself, there's no way to protect your
Right.
property. What were those movies that were so horror-filled with all those people shooting each other? I
Oh,
forget what they.
is it The Walking? I mean, it could be any of them. The Walking Dead. I'm thinking like a post-apocalyptic, like
Yes, one of
zombie
those.
film. Yeah, one of those.
Well, usually those are based on a breakdown of
Right.
order, a breakdown of mutual trust and confidence in one another and in the systems which we created to govern ourselves.
Yeah.
And that's where this kind of stuff can lead. And that's why we created the Article 3 coalition. We want to do all that we can. And by the way, none of this, we're about 50-50 of judges who are appointed by
Yeah.
democratically elected presidents and those appointed by Republican elected presidents. Uh, this has nothing to do with what party you're in. It has to do with a deep and profound belief in the goodness of this country and in its Constitution. A good and profound belief that we need to continue on in a civil fashion to follow the law, or that it will lead to chaos. So there's nothing in it for us. I mean, we're
You've
guys that
had
are
your career.
retired. Yeah, we've had it. I mean, some of us are still working. I am, but not all of us. Some are fully retired. Judges don't tend to quit. I mean, it's like you retire from the bench, but you never require from the commitment to
Yeah.
justice. It's just no such thing.
I've had the privilege of interviewing quite a few of your colleagues from the coalition over this year as we've launched the podcast. Reagan, Clinton, both Bushes, appointees from every political spectrum. I think it's what the coalition does best is bring such a variety of people to the table to speak on these issues and that commitment to public service and that it can look like a lot of different things at a lot of different stages in your career has been such a resounding theme. I don't know if you know this, but you're going to be our last interview of the 2025 season. We're going to be taking a short break so everyone can go celebrate New Year's. But as we are entering into 2026, going into New Year's, I'm going to ask you the most difficult question I've asked you yet, which is, in this new year, what is something we have to be hopeful about in our judiciary, in our political climate, what have you? What's one, give me one thing we can look forward to.
I don't like to think in apocalyptic terms. I like to think that we the people can make it happen, just like we did 250 years ago. They were highly dissatisfied with the way things were. and they made it change, and it worked. And I think today, our greatest enemy really is not any of the things you and I have discussed. You know what our greatest enemy is? It's public
Hmm.
apathy. It's the lack of civics education. It's the things we're talking about. Do people really know about them? Are the children being taught that? So apathy is probably our greatest enemy. So, but we've been through other tough spots before, including wars in which our very existence was threatened. World War II, when my father was in the Army Airborne, and
Mhm.
I was alive, but here in the States. Uh, we've been through tough spots before. We will get through this, but it will call, we're just a bunch of judges. The citizens have to reach
Yeah.
out. One of our goals, by the way, is somehow to find a way to talk to students, to mothers and fathers, to people, and not in legalese, but just about the greatness of this country and what benefits it brings to us being free people.
Yeah.
So we're trying to do that. It's really hard. It's hard to find the audiences, and it's hard. People want to know, are you sincere in what you say? And the only thing we can do is try to persuade them that we are. And I think one of the things is nobody's paying us to do anything. There's nothing in it for us other than a love of this country. And we tell
Yeah.
them that. And so we're hopeful that, and the whole kinds of things that keep our republic are the large, we're just one piece of that. It's educational.
Yeah.
And the more we educate and the more we teach, I think the better off the country will be.
Well, Judge, thank you for your lifetime of service, your continued work on these really important issues, kind of talking through all that with me today. It's been a pleasure, and I wish you and yours a very happy New Year.
Thank you, Brooke, and Happy New Year to you too.
Thank you.
If you like this episode, please share it on social media and tell your friends. It's the best way for folks to find out about us. I hope you'll agree that our guest is indeed a keeper of the Republic. If you want to learn more about how you can help keep our Republic, stop on over to our website, keepourrepublic.org.